So, today I thought I would record a video talking about post-recovery, post-full recovery from chronic fatigue syndrome, long COVID, whatever the condition is. As I always say in my videos, this is really broad, right? Don't let your mind fool you into thinking that your POTS or your fibromyalgia is different. A lot of people watching my videos are already on the right path, so this is maybe for someone new. But what I want to talk about is my experience post full recovery. So basically, I reached what I would call full recovery about 1.5 years ago now, after being sick for around 2 years and living a really limited life in those 2 years, and then really coming out of that. And the reason it was full recovery for me, because all the fear was gone. Like someone recently commented on one of my videos, and it's my exact perspective as well. The biggest part of this whole condition is mostly fear. And maybe that doesn't land with you. I remember I mentioned this on my Raylan Nagel interview, and some of the comments, that video got really good feedback, but some of the comments were very upset that when I said that I said that the biggest part of this is fear. And that's fine. That's not everybody's going to agree with what I say. But just feel into that, as always. If what I'm saying triggers you, it's really because it's triggering a belief, right? Your beliefs come to the surface. Like, your response to what I'm trying to say is purely a reflection of your own beliefs. Whatever I say, and then you're like, no, that's wrong, that's because that's what I'm saying is showing you where you're limiting yourself, right? If I say it's entirely possible for you to get to the point where you can live extremely fully and engaged with life with absolutely no concern for pacing anymore, and that brings up a fear response or anger towards me, all of that is triggering your limiting beliefs, right? So there's no judgment there, as I always say. It's not like, oh, you're a bad person because you have those beliefs. It's an opportunity for you to now explore your own belief systems that are holding you back. That's part of this journey, right? For me, as this journey has gone deeper and deeper and deeper, it's seeing where there were still areas in my life where there was a fear belief, where there was a limiting belief, and letting that come to the surface, see how it was holding me back. Maybe we struggle with it for a while, and then at some point it drops because we see that it was just a belief and that we were kind of creating our own limitations through that belief. So if I can share from my own experience, the post-full recovery period for me has been about really pushing myself to the limits, to the boundaries, because that's how my recovery went, right? So I got to the point where I had the awakening shift, which for me was absolutely essential for my recovery, because that was where fear dropped, and I could see that whatever thought came into my mind was just a thought. It wasn't me anymore. And then from there, I had this kind of freedom to do what I wanted in my life. So I've spoken to some people, I've had people comment on some of my stuff saying, be careful. You might feel like full recovery, but I had, like, this is from somebody else's perspective, I had a full recovery and then I started running marathons again, and then I got sick again. So I can relate to that, because what I've found over this period is that when I pushed myself hard with the wrong motivations, with inauthentic kind of drives, or mostly doing things for people pleasing or to fit in with social standards, to work a certain job so I could fit in with society. In those periods, the more I expended my energy, the worse I started to feel. But at the same time, for me, it never felt like I was getting sick again. It never felt like, oh no, full recovery is lost. I could notice the fears coming up, but That's why I say awakening is so essential, because for me, whatever comes up, I can just see that, oh, this is something for me to explore that is arising in my experience. It's not me, right? So there could be thoughts saying, oh no, how can I talk about recovery if I'm not feeling good anymore? And then it's like, wait, that's just a fear thought. Let's explore what's coming up in the body. So one thing to say is, like, after full recovery, there can still be lots of difficulties to navigate in life. There can still be lots of contractions and difficult sensations that arise, because now, for me, it felt like stepping into hard mode now, because I stepped out of my kind of very closed off life where I reached full recovery, where I was meditating and I cut out all stress. I wasn't working. Didn't have a lot of responsibilities. I did all of that in order to make getting to the roots of this illness my priority. I was like, I'm going to drop everything until I'm not going to kind of carry on with this in the background. So I did that. And then it was like, life's like, okay, now you're ready. Now you have to find out how to carry what you've discovered into your expression in the world now. And there was a lot of learning over the last year and a half as I went back to like an old job. It was great for a while, but it got more and more uncomfortable, and that wasn't bad. That was life showing me that don't stay here. This is not for you. This is not the end for you. And that was perfect. That's brilliant, because okay, that's not what I want to do anymore. So, but I had to go through it. Like, the end of my last season of work was really tough. It was draining. I was working long hours, and what was draining was that I was having to limit my expression, right? In my work, I wasn't able to share this kind of stuff that I've learned, that feels like my authentic expression, is to be able to use my own kind of experience of coming out of my suffering, and talking about that is so helpful for other people, and I really enjoy it. And it's like, that's where life is saying yes. So I had to see where life was saying no. But at the same time, it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a problem. It wasn't like, oh no, I made a mistake by kind of going to work and then I had a setback again, and now if I hadn't done that, I would be healthy. And a lot of people interpret it this way, and that's really something you have to let go of. A lot of people will be like, I recovered and then I went into this area of life and I started to feel worse, and that was a mistake. It's not a mistake. It's the next step of the process. It's where you get to see, I had to have that experience of working for a couple of months and really finding that this is not aligning. My body is feeling worse because this is not aligning. I'm feeling drained. And I wouldn't know, I wouldn't push myself so much to expand in the areas of my life that do feel good if I hadn't had that experience of, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to get stuck in this expression, one way to say it. So that is exactly what then drove me into the next step. In now, like, okay, let me see where I can expand in the areas of my life that say yes, where I can expand in the areas of my life that say, this is right for me, that feels right, and life will give you the pointers, right? It's a beautiful thing. Just listen to the body and listen to where you're feeling resistance. And a friend of mine, Matt, I shared one of his videos. He said something to me the other day, is you always find we were chatting, and his response was, the stream always finds the path of least resistance. And that's it, right? You'll explore life and you'll see where there's lots of resistance, and then you use that as an opportunity to deal with the experience of resistance. But then you decide, then you set your intention of, that doesn't feel right for me. That's not my path. At the same time, it's okay if you don't know what your path is yet. It's okay if you don't know where you're going exactly. It will clarify. That's another part of this post-awakening, post-recovery period, is there's like a no man's land where all of your egoic drives maybe fall away. That's what happened for me. There was just like a feeling of not wanting to push myself in any area of my life, because it all felt like, well, that's how I used to do it when I had all these egoic motivations. But that does pass, because you start to see that that's an ego trap out of fear, right? That's what I eventually saw for myself. It was like I went through this period, and it's a very natural part of the process. Adyashanti helped me a lot there. His book, The End of Your World, is all about navigating this kind of post, when you have some insight, some realization. It doesn't even have to be like a massive awakening, but if you start to see that you're not your mind, you're not your thoughts, you're not your ego, there's a lot of sticking points, and Adyashanti's, that book is really good. And he talks about this spiritual no man's land where the small ego falls away, but you haven't quite come into alignment with the universal will, right? So like your kind of personal will gets dissolved, and then once you've done enough of the shadow work, once you've done enough of the emotion work, enough of the fear and doubt passes away, where now you can just express naturally, right? And that's been my experience. For a year and a half after awakening, there was like a couple of months of just pure spontaneousness and going back into life. And then eventually life saying, okay, no, but you're not just going back into life the way it used to be. Now you're going to find out how to live from this new space, and to not hold yourself back. And there was, in my experience, a lot of self-destructive habits to still drop, a lot of self-limiting beliefs to still drop. Sure, I dropped the illness, but there was fear about expressing fully. There was fear about just living exactly how I wanted to, right? There was doubts about, is this living from ego or is this living from authenticity? And then eventually seeing that the mind actually, like, doubt is the mind, right? So just live, do the things you want to, and you will learn from it. That's how it's been for me. It's just like, I'll do whatever. I'll go gym really intensely again. I'll go compete in cycling, and then see how the body responds. You have to see the fears that come up, right? That's how you keep going. It's not about, it's always like this. It's not about avoiding the discomfort. It's about bringing the discomfort to you so you can see, what resistance have I not worked through yet? So maybe people don't tackle this the way I did, and people won't. You know, I'm not saying do this exactly the same way that I did, but I'm sharing how I did do it, so maybe that can help you in your own process, right? For me, full recovery was not full recovery unless I could see any area of my life that brought up doubt, right? So it was just doing everything, just not holding back from any area of my life out of fear. And through doing that, I pushed myself into some really tough spaces again, because as I was touching on, it's really important to do it from a space of authenticity, right? So if I dropped my meditation and some of the things that I'd found beneficial to myself and got caught up in too much distracting behavior again, I would feel like shit. My body would start to get contracted. Life would be saying, this is not it. And then it can be difficult again to crawl out of that. But there was never a point where I was like, oh, I've lost it. It was just like, oh, okay. I can see what isn't right. And again, I'm glad I did all of that. I'm glad I let myself go through periods where I was just doing pure distraction behavior, because that is what allowed me to see how unsatisfying it is in the end. It's like, if the mind's saying, rather than doing this, I would rather just watch kind of Netflix or scroll Instagram, or what is the most distracting behavior, even pornography and sex. It's, sure, go explore those to the absolute limits until you feel like shit from it. That's what I did. It was like, okay, if there's a desire in my mind arising like that, I'm going to let myself do it. But I'm not saying that I would recommend this approach to everyone, because it put me in some really tough spaces again, where there was real kind of deep feeling like uncomfortable stuff. But at the same time, I wanted to feel that stuff. I knew that to get to liberation, you have to be comfortable with feeling anything. And I was like, well, even if this stuff is going to make me feel worse, I'm willing to go into those spaces. But for me now, it's about coming into balance, right? Because it's like, yeah, that can be pretty intense. If you keep pushing yourself into overwhelm, at some point you're going to drop it. You're going to stop doing it. Angelo said something like, with the later stages of realization, it's like banging, like the suffering that still arises. It's like you're banging your head against a concrete wall, and eventually you just see how good it feels to stop banging your head against the wall. And that's what it feels like. It's like, okay, well, I'll drop those behaviors now. But there's a lot of momentum to them, right? So the pull to distract is strong. So that's why I said, for me, the approach was to just let it all happen, let myself do it, to see how dissatisfying it is. Another person that actually helped me with this, she's not actually online anymore, her name was Nargis. She kind of went a little bit strange in her stuff she was sharing. But she had a lot of good insight. And one of the things she said that really aligned with my approach was this old Russian, because I think she was Russian, this old Russian saying, or I don't know, the way they used to deal with smoking in Russia. So if a kid wanted to smoke, instead of the parents kind of saying, hey, don't smoke, that's bad for you, and then keeping it as like this thing that the mind would have, is like, oh, but I want to smoke, but it's out of bounds, and then that's what keeps the allure there, because it's out of bounds. So maybe that's what's going to make me happy. So instead of doing that, they would just I'm not advocating for this at all, but I'm just like, take this metaphor, and this is exactly feels like how I was doing this, is you make them smoke the whole pack of cigarettes, and it's so disgusting that you just have no desire to smoke anymore. And that's what it felt like for me. It was like all of these, I let myself just eat like shit, just watch shit, just do all of these things that were not good for me after full recovery, because there was no fear anymore. There was no like, oh no, this is going to give me a crash. It was like, well, I'm okay with whatever comes up. But it did make me feel like such shit that eventually, when the time comes up to do I want to distract or do I want to sit and feel, it just was a much easier decision, because I'd been there. I'd smoked the whole pack of cigarettes, metaphorically, and I didn't want to do that anymore. So that was my approach. I'm not saying everybody has to do it that way, because you have to have worked through a lot of fear and doubt, because it will bring up challenging stuff for sure. But I was game for it. But it did bring up a lot of helplessness, because there was no, like, things would come up. I would push my body into difficult states again, but there was no falling back on, oh no, I have a chronic illness. It was just like, well, shit, I have to deal with this now. And it passes, right? So you'll find your natural way out. But for me, it was about coming back into balance. It was like, okay, well, I just have to do what's right for me. I have to see where I'm expending too much energy and cut back, and be willing to set boundaries so that I don't keep pushing myself into that uncomfortable state. And then things become more natural, where it's now. And last thing I wanted to touch on is what is possible when all the fear and doubt is completely eradicated. For people that say, careful, you could push yourself back into a chronic illness. I yesterday competed in like a beautiful cycling race in Cape Town. It's amazing. I love it. I do it every year. Well, except when I was sick. That was one of the sad parts about being sick, is I couldn't compete in this race anymore. And it's like a 110 kilometer race. And basically I competed, and I had an average heart rate, because I go balls to the wall in the race. So I have an average heart rate of 181 for 3 hours. So that's, for anybody that exercises, that's zone 5 for 3 hours. That's super intense. And I was sick leading up to this race. and I only got like 3 hours of sleep before the race. And I did the race, and I've had enough experience of pushing myself into these uncomfortable spaces that whatever came up afterwards was absolutely fine. But yeah, so I'm feeling fine now. Sure, I could feel like maybe there's a little bit less energy, but it's crazy when all doubt goes, when all fear goes, the possibilities of what you're capable of are truly astounding, right? But for me, I still had to see where some fear would still arise. Like I would do these things where I would push myself really hard, and then some fear would be like, well, maybe I am pushing myself too hard. But all that was actually about was that there was something I still didn't want to feel. And a part of me knew that. So that's what was important, was over this 1.5 years of recovery, I pushed myself so much. And then any time that I was going into doubt mode, I just needed to sit and feel more, because it was like, what's actually coming up? Is there something I don't want to feel? And that's sending me into these reactions in my mind. But again, I'm not advocating that everybody pushes themselves like crazy, because what will happen is it might bring out doubt and fear and difficult states. And I don't want to recommend that you push yourself into that if you're not ready to feel into it. So take the path that works for you. My path through this has been like this. Through awakening and recovery, it's been very steep, and maybe that's just my personality type, right? For a lot of other people, it's going to be more of a winding path. So it's your path is right for you, for your nervous system, for your personality. It's right for you. But yeah, I thought I would just share this so that anybody that feels like they pushed themselves into a really intense state, just know that that is just the next learning phase, right? It can be really tough, it can be really challenging, but nothing's gone wrong. It's showing you where there's still doubt and fear. Because when there is no more doubt and fear, then there is no more doubt and fear. So if you push yourself into a place where there's a lot of doubt and fear, that's fine. That just means that there was doubt and fear that needed to be worked through. And the only way to work through it was for you to land up in a place where doubt and fear would come to the surface. So yeah, that's, I guess, what I wanted to touch on is all of that. Cool.